In this video, I'll be explaining the musical composition techniques and insights that we can learn from the track called Electric Elephants by Jay Hardway. Obviously, I do not know how this track was composed exactly, but composers oftentimes work intuitively. They keep rearranging the notes until it sounds just right. That subconscious decision making is usually based on their own musical truths they develop themselves or learned from others. In this video, I'll try to explain these musical truths logically. Maybe then they can become tools in your toolkit that help shape your own sound. Let's get to it. The harmonic foundation of the track lies in something called the minor natural scale. This scale has been used for centuries in countless musical styles and musical eras. This scale consists of 7 different notes. That means that there are also notes which are not used, which are these. Let's call them the forbidden notes for now. The notes within the scale have an important property. When you play them together like so, they don't clash too much. Now, this clashing gets a lot worse if I would include one of the forbidden notes and play them together like so. So let's compare again. These are only the notes within the scale. And now we include a few forbidden notes again. So why is it important that all notes can be played simultaneously without too much harmonic conflict? Well, it means that if the sound has a reverb, delay, or release tail, those tails that bleed into each other create a pleasant soundscape. And it also allows more freedom to choose for longer reverb tails. So for comparison, let's again include a few forbidden notes and listen to what happens with the reverb. So the lesson here is to stick to only the 7 different notes that are on the natural scale. Jay Hardway applied this rule to both the melody and the chord progressions of the track. I'll write a part of his main melody for the track here to show this concept visually. This is an easy trick to verify that the notes are indeed on the scale. So now let's try to understand the bass melody. Maybe the easiest way to do that is to also consider it a natural minor scale. It is ascending, so it is going up, and it is shifted by one note, so that when it arrives at the root note of the track, it will be exactly at the beginning of the next bar. To understand the chords that are used in the chord progressions, let's first add identical minor triads to all the bass notes. So as you could probably tell, these chords didn't sound harmonically compatible at all, but that's because there are forbidden notes in there. I'll show you a trick that you can use to easily identify those forbidden notes. In these triads, you will find that the forbidden notes are only used once in the entire sequence. So when you find one of those notes, you know you have to either raise it by one semitone or lower it. If you make that adjustment, all chords in this system will only contain notes that are on this natural scale, and that makes them harmonically compatible. So as you could see, I raised that D sharp up to an E in the 3rd chord. In the 4th chord, I raise the C up to a C sharp. The 7th chord contains an F, which obviously needs to become an F sharp. And the last chord that contains a G, we'll see that G raised to a G sharp. So as you can tell, the chords are connected now, they harmonically make sense, so we can use these chords as tools to make the chord progressions. Although a chord progression supports a main melody, a powerful way to make chord progressions more emotional or interesting is to make them partly melodic themselves. As you can see, there is a very simple melody here, and I made this melody to first demonstrate this concept. So how is this done? Well, the third chord here originally consisted of these 4 notes. So what is that F sharp doing there? Well, it was borrowed from the second chord, the one that preceded it, and that glues those 2 chords together. You can make far more extensive use of this technique, but in order to do that, it makes sense to first add rhythm to the chord progression. So this is Jay Hardway's chord progression rhythm, and now that we have it, we can change the very last part of the progression to insert a new bass note, which is a 5th above the root note. That creates a 5-2-1 transition. This type of transition has been used extensively in both classical and modern music. It is usually used to create a moment of resolving tension. Jay Hardway chose to include this 5-to-1 transition in his chord progressions in the track. So now that we have defined a set of composition techniques, and we also have a set of harmonically compatible chords, let's actually go ahead and build a chord progression. Use melodic elements, use rhythm to make it as interesting as we can make it. We got some notes from the third chord, let's try to put those into the second chord to glue them together. There's an F sharp there in the second chord. Let's put that into the third chord, mixing things up a little bit. And then we have, what do we have? We have an E over there. Maybe we can import that into the third chord as well. And there's an F sharp all the way over there. Let's put that here to announce it in a way. And then we get a melody going on. Now we have 3 C sharps over here. Maybe we can vary that a little bit as well. Like so. And then we have these beautiful ascending lines. So we have an E, an F sharp, a G sharp, and an A over here. Let's make that a melody that comes a little bit earlier. That's what Jay Hardway did. So this G sharp, let's put it over here, and this A, let's put that one over here. Of course, we need to lengthen these notes so they glue together nicely. Nice tension going on here, an A against the G sharp. And that gets resolved. And let's see, here we can make a little bit of a melody as well. So we can make that a C sharp, so this becomes melodic. Now we're quite close to the original chord progression by Jay Hardway already. For the bass, we initially started out with an ascending scale as a melody that ends on a tonic root at the beginning of the next 8-bar sequence. That created the anticipation that we were going for. But this can also be achieved with a descending scale. And if you can vary the bass melody like that, you can vary the whole chord progression with it without it losing its supporting function or harmonic compatibility. And of course, if we have a descending scale and an ascending scale, we can make combinations of those two as well. So here are a few examples of chord progressions you can make this way. We discussed 5 composition techniques up to this point. There are a few more, but from this point onwards we'll be using Jay Hardway's actual melody and chord progression. So the first thing to note about this progression is that Jay chose to repeat an entire section of the scale from the second half to the first half. This creates repetition and therefore recognition with the listener. And what you can also hear is that he repeats the F sharp from the first chord in the second. Naturally, the second chord would have contained the C sharp. That's what the bass note is. By using an F sharp, again, he creates repetition. The third chord is on the bass note of D, so that would naturally contain a D in the triad as well, but instead he chose to use a C sharp. That itself is a repetition of the C sharp in the first chord. You can tell he reused the notes from the third chord in the seventh chord, but created some variation, and that leads to development. The same for the fourth chord, it gets developed in the eighth chord. There's also a 5-to-1 transition. With that transition, you create the opportunity to resolve tension. You see a melody here. There's another melody here. So what can we say about these 8 bars of music? Because of the optimization, it contains a lot of repetition and therefore recognition. It contains development, melodic usage of notes, and there's a 5-to-1 transition there as well. Essentially, this is like a puzzle that has been solved with all the pieces working together. Now the bass and the chord progressions have been analyzed. Let's analyze the melody also. Let's first give it a listen. So, like the chord progression, the melody is 8 bars long, and this is divided up into 2 sections of 4 bars each. And each bar in this 4-bar section has its own function, its own moment, if you will. A way to think of development in a melody is to count the notes in each bar. If we count a note that has been shared between 2 bars as half a note for each one of those bars, the first bar has 4.5 notes, the second one is 5.5, so there's an acceleration, a development there. The third again has 4.5 notes and the same rhythm as the first bar, so there is recognition because of repetition. And the fourth bar has 6.5 notes, which provides again a sense of development. It's like the first bar asks a question and the second bar gives the answer. The third bar again asks a question and the fourth bar gives an answer. So again, in this 4-bar section we have repetition as well as development. But as we look at the melody as a whole, so all 8 bars, we see another system of repetition and another system of development. Bars 5, 6, and 7 are copies of bars 1, 2, and 3. That creates repetition. And if we look at bar 4 and compare it to bar 8, we see the same structure, except the last 2 notes are higher, so there is development. Oftentimes it sounds natural in a melody if notes that are far apart in pitch are played slowly. If you want to speed things up, have the notes closer together in pitch. An easy rule of thumb to follow if you have the piano roll open and you can see the melody visually is that the vertical spacing of the notes have to match the horizontal spacing of the notes. If they're far apart vertically, they should be further apart horizontally, and vice versa. Now, if you think of these composition techniques as rules that you have to follow or as constraints that do not allow you to color outside the lines, it becomes tempting to conclude that this would inhibit the creative process. But oftentimes the opposite is true. This next melody, for example, is written based on those rules. By now you might wonder, why at all bother with all of these musical rules? After all, many people would argue there are no rules in music. And in a way, this is true. A way to understand this contradiction is to realize that you could have chosen a completely different set of rules and go for a completely different sound. There is no arbiter who tells you what to compose and not to compose. But having a set of rules can initiate creativity, and this method of working has been tried and tested before. If you have any questions, you can hit me up in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care and make some awesome music.